I'd like to call the Suffolk Planning Commission to order. I will call on Commissioner Edwards to do the invocation.
Let us pray. O wise and most gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you this day, thanking you for all your many blessings, God. We thank you for the ability and the comfort of living in the greatest country on the face of this earth. God, we thank you that you have given us wise leaders. We thank you, God, that you've given us the opportunity to have a choice in our leadership. And God, we just ask at this time that you will continue to walk with them and give them the strength, the courage, and the wisdom to do things your way. God, we thank you for all the members on this commission and all the staff and those who work to make our city a great place. And God, we thank you for the citizens who come out and take time out of their busy schedules to make their voice heard. Lord, we ask today that we will reason together one with another in wisdom and in truth. Lord, we ask that you bless this time, and you ask, God, that you protect our homes, that we are away, and that they will be safe when we return back to them. Lord, we ask all these things in your precious name we do pray. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Wine, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Creekmore.
Here.
Commissioner Eberwine.
Here.
Commissioner Edwards. Here. Commissioner Goodman.
Here.
Commissioner Hicks. Commissioner Staylor. Here. And Chairman Singleton.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wine. Are there any corrections to the minutes from the December meeting? Hearing none, they will stand as presented. We have an opening in our chair up here because of one of our Commissioner Rector has moved on to City Council. We congratulate him on that move. And that leaves a vacancy for 5 months until the July meeting. So I'm opening the floor for a motion, a nomination for someone to fill that capacity.
I'll make a motion, please. Motion to nominate Commissioner Staylor for Vice Chair.
Second motion.
Got a motion and a second for Commissioner Staylor. Is there any other names? We'll close it on that and we will vote. Mr. Wine, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Creekmore.
Yes.
Commissioner Eberwine.
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yes.
Commissioner Goodman.
Yes.
Commissioner Hicks.
Yes.
Commissioner Staylor.
Yes.
And Chairman Singleton.
Yes.
The motion is approved by a vote of 7-0.
Congratulations, Mr. Staylor.
Thank you very much. I will do my best to honor the office of which I have been appointed.
You have the option of remaining in that seat or you want to move over?
Because the voting system.
Okay, stay where you're at today.
Stay here. That is wonderful.
We don't want to complicate anything more.
I can't leave Johnny yet.
We have an opening at this time also for the ordinance, but we'll fill that at a later time. Okay. Today we have 2 items on our agenda for public hearings. We have a conditional use permit request CUP 2022-028 Indian Trail Solar Facility. And the second item is part of the same package as a conditional use permit request CUP 2022-029 for Indian Trail facilities. I'd like to hear a motion to combine the two and have combined staff report and handle them as individual for as far as the voting.
So move.
Okay.
So moved.
Got a second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I will open a public hearing. Public hearings for 60 minutes now that we'll combine those two. And there will be 20 minutes for the proponents to make their presentation. And there will be 30 minutes for the opponents for their opposition to the motion. And there will be 10 minutes for the proponents to do rebuttal. Having that being said, I will now open the public hearing for, okay, the staff report, I'm sorry. We'll get the staff report first, Mr. Bateman.
Oh, yeah. Read the caption.
Yeah, read the
Yeah, I'll
caption.
read the caption. All right, Mr. Chairman, this is a conditional use permit request, CUP 2022-028, Indian Trail Solar Facility, submitted by Carson Wynand, CVE North America, Inc., applicant on behalf of Indian Trail Solar LLC, property owner in accordance with sections 31306 and 31406 of the Unified Development Ordinance to grant a conditional use permit to establish a solar energy facility on a property located on Indian Trail, zoning map 39, parcel 39. The affected area is further identified as being located in the Holy Neck voting borough, zoned A, agricultural zoning district. The 2035 comprehensive plan designates this area as part of the rural agricultural use district. When you act on this request, you will be acting on a resolution to present a report and recommendation to City Council relating to conditional use permit request, CUP 2022-028. Additionally, and a companion piece to this, we have conditional use permit request CUP 2022-029 Indian Trail Solar Facility. This is also submitted by Carson Wynand, CVE North America, Inc., applicant on behalf of Indian Trail Solar LLC, property owner in accordance with sections 31306 and 31406 of the Unified Development Ordinance to grant a conditional use permit to establish a solar facility on property located on Indian Trail zoning map 29, parcel 2. The affected area is further identified as being located in the Holy Neck voting borough, zoned A, agricultural zoning district. The 2035 comprehensive plan designates this area as part of the rural agricultural use district. When you act on this request, you will be acting on a resolution to present a report and recommendation to City Council relating to conditional use permit request, CUP 2022-029. Staff Planner Joshua Bateman will provide staff's report on these requests.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Bateman. I'm the Principal Planner with the City of Suffolk Planning and Community Development Department. It is my pleasure to present on these two CUPs for solar facilities in the Rural Agricultural Use District out near Holland. In the interest of disclosure, these are not my first utility-scale solar facilities that I've ever presented on in my capacity as a professional planner, nor is the first facilities that I've, site plan reviewed, but they are my first community or shared solar projects, which are these smaller projects that I'll get into the details of here in my presentation. So as part of these requests, staff has reviewed two applications for two separate projects for conditional use permits to establish solar energy facilities on two parcels located on opposite sides of Indian Trail, just northeast of Ruritan Boulevard. So it's about 2 miles from the village of Holland north. It's about a little over a mile on Ruritan Boulevard, and then you turn right on Indian Trail, and it's about 0.8 or 0.9 miles down to where these sites are located. The proposed facilities consist of a 5-megawatt facility, and that includes the solar modules themselves as well as the underground cables, the inverters, access roads, fencing, landscaping, and that's for the project on the south side of the road known as CVE South. That's located on 28.9 acres. And there's also proposed the second project case number ending in 29 is for a 3-megawatt facility that's located on 23.7 acres on the north side of the road for the CVE North project. The subject parcels, as Mr. Wine indicated, are located outside of the city's growth areas in the rural agricultural land use district. So each of the subject parcels, as you can see, are located on opposite sides of Indian Trail. The one on the left is the south project, the parcel on the south side. The project there shown on the right is for the north project. The south project surrounds 4 single-family residential parcels. They're located to the immediate north. If I can get my highlighter to work here properly, so that I'm talking about these 4 parcels here. 3 of them have single-family detached dwellings on them. The closest residential parcel sits vacant currently. And the north project surrounds 2 single-family detached parcels. but only the westernmost of those two parcels is actually located directly adjacent. The other parcel, while it's surrounded by the property, that's the subject property, it's not directly adjacent to the solar facility. So otherwise, these two sites are surrounded by agricultural and forestal land uses, as you can see from the aerial imagery there. Each of the two project areas consists of farm fields, mostly surrounded by existing mature forest. And I'll talk more about that as well here in a minute. So this is the project concept plan for the South project, which comprises, as I indicated, 28.9 acres of the overall 136.5 acre parcel. The wetland delineation that was done by WSSI found 7.2 acres of wetlands on the property, and that's mostly associated with this stream feature that you can see here that runs in this direction. Actually, I think it flows northward. So that's mostly what that wetland acreage is associated with, that stream feature. And direct impacts to wetlands that are shown in the vicinity of the project area by this symbol here, and here will be avoided. So there are no proposals to directly fill or otherwise impact wetlands that would necessitate permits from the Army Corps and things of that nature. The front of the facility at its northwest corner is located 432 feet along this axis here, and about 607 feet at this axis here from the nearest residential property lines. The facility will be located on an improved gravel access road. It's currently a farm road, a dirt farm road. That will be improved with gravel and a commercial entrance installed to access the facility with both the construction traffic that we expect as well as the permanent traffic that will need to access the facility for operation and maintenance. So the closest residential parcel, as I indicated here, this one that's the westernmost, is vacant. There are 3 single-family residences, as I indicated, on the other 3 lots. The project is surrounded to the east, the west, and the south with a young pine stand, essentially, that exhibits about 10 years of growth, I would say. So those trees are about 15 feet in height and provide a very good visual screen together with the undergrowth vegetation. Beyond that is mature mixed hardwood forest that sort of buffers the stream there. And a 50-foot landscape buffer is proposed to be installed adjacent to the facility's northern edge to screen the facility from view from those single-family residences. Per the UDO, this buffer is required to consist of trees that are 6 feet in height at the time of planting in a minimum of 2 rows, or 1 row of evergreen screening trees planted 8 feet on center supplemented by shrubs, or 2 large canopy trees every 25 feet and 3 understory trees planted every 15 feet. If I have it my way, and I'm hopeful that I will, to get the best screening here, I think the double staggered row of evergreen trees that are at least 6 feet in height at the time of planting and provide a continuous year-round vegetative screen is the way to go. As we all know from seeing these utility-scale solar facilities throughout our region, I come here from planning in Isle of Wight, and I can tell you it's the same basic thing there that it is here. You know, that's been one of the weaknesses of these solar facilities in our area is the landscaping. If care isn't taken to select the right trees for planting, the right vegetation for planting, and care isn't taken with respect to maintaining that vegetation, you get a buffer that really struggles to get established and provide that year-round screening that is really needed. So that's going to be a focus of mine as I move forward to the site plan review to make sure that we get the best screening possible. So there are 2 small areas that are labeled on the plan. As you can see from this image where the solar facility occupies, that it occupies mostly the farm field that's already an open pasture, open crop field rather. There are some small areas of clearing that are necessary here, and I think that's it, for shade management. And what that is they'll clear the trees back so that they're located farther from the edge of the facility, so when that sunlight comes in from the east, it can directly hit those panels. It won't be shaded by those existing trees. So there will be some limited tree clearing on the south project for shade management. Otherwise, the remaining forested area surrounding the site is proposed to be preserved. Nevertheless, my experience with these facilities tells me that you are surrounded by a pine stand. Owners retain the logging rights to that, and if you don't do something to require that that be preserved in its existing state, what will typically happen is when that grows to a level of maturity that it can be harvested, it will be, and then you lose your buffer from those directions. So that's something that we're attempting to address through the recommended conditions. Stormwater is managed with this particular project through the use of vegetated filter strips, which will be supplemented with level spreaders to convert the concentrated runoff from the panels themselves, which are considered impervious, to sheet flow and treat it in the vegetated filter strips before it's released into the environment. This is any water that runs off the site. On both of these parcels, there's currently agricultural drain tile in place that discharges to a receiving channel. So that's going to help a lot with making sure that water that infiltrates into the soil is treated before it enters these this corrugated plastic piping system, this drain tile system, and is discharged. So it allows that soil to treat that. So what we're really talking about here when we're talking about runoff is during the larger storm events when the infiltration capacity of the ground is reached and the water then, any additional water that flows off the land, is to convert that into sheet flow and treat it before it's released into surrounding areas. So this is the site plan, or the conceptual site plan, I should say, for the project to the north. It comprises 23.7 acres of a larger 110.3 acre tract. A wetland delineation conducted found 1.94 acres of wetlands on the parcel, also direct impacts to which will be avoided. You can see where they bisect the two areas or the two fields of panels right there. The front of the facility, its northwest corner, is located 394 feet from Indian Trail, which is approximately 570 feet at its southwestern corner, and it's situated 675 feet from the nearest corner of the only adjacent residential property, which is right here. So that distance is about 674 feet to the facility, and this distance here is about 394 feet. Originally, as proposed, they were proposing to bring it up closer to the road, about 110 feet off the road, even though it would have been sufficiently distant from that nearest residential property. Throughout this presentation, you're going to hear me talk about best practices that we've identified with respect to these utility-scale solar facilities as we've been doing this. And I think farther off the public road, less visible from the public road, is better. So that's the reason for that. This project is also surrounded by mature pine, beyond which is mature mixed-use forest. This pine stand is a lot older. A 50-foot landscape buffer will be installed along the southern edge, even though this is oriented east to west. This is actually the southern edge, and along this southeastern corner to screen the facility from view from those vantage points, from those directions. Looking up at the close-up of the concept plan, in addition to more substantial clearing for the proposed solar equipment. So anywhere where you see solar panels covering existing forest, that's going to be right here and right in this area here. That will have to be cleared to make room for the solar panels themselves. In addition to that, there's some additional areas of tree clearing for shade management to keep the existing wood line back from the solar facility, prevent shading here in those areas. So this one involves a little bit more substantial clearing of trees to make room for the facility, although it's well below what I've seen on larger utility-scale solar projects that use old pine stands and silvicultural lands for their location. But nevertheless, that is a more significant impact with the north project than with the south project. So stormwater is also, in this case, managed through the filter strips with the level spreaders. And this approach is the preferred approach of the city of Suffolk's Public Works Engineering Department, and is also consistent with the 2021 DEQ regulatory guidance regarding the impervious nature of the panels themselves, which grandfathers any project that is expected to, or receives an interconnection agreement prior to December 31st, 2024, I believe. And this project almost certainly is on schedule to meet that deadline. So access to the site is via an existing farm road. As I indicated, that's for the south site. That will be upgraded to a standard commercial entrance, having a hard surfaced apron extending a minimum of 50 feet into the site. And these commercial entrances are quite wide. I think they're either 25 or 30 foot wide, which is necessary for the tractor trailers that are delivering the modules themselves to be able to turn. Otherwise, they would not be able to turn in easily from Indian Trail, which is pretty narrow, onto this and into this entrance. But that will be upgraded, and the apron will be extended a minimum of 50 feet into the site. The access road itself will be improved with gravel to accommodate construction and permanent vehicle traffic. 8-foot agricultural style fencing is proposed to enclose the facility for security purposes. Staff has experienced success in the past mandating the use of fencing that is visually compatible with livestock fencing and the type of fencing that's typically found in rural agricultural settings. If you let them put up a chain link security fencing, it kind of looks out of place a lot of times in a rural setting, especially where it's visible to the public roads and adjacent properties. I think that's perfectly okay for large solar fields that aren't visible to anyone, but when you're talking about the section of the facility that's located closest to public roads or other properties, I think you have to be a little bit more sensitive to what that fencing actually looks like. So the solar panels are approximately 10 feet at height at maximum tilt. So that's when they're rotated to track and they're tilted at their highest extent, you're looking at about a 10-foot structure in height. That is well under the 25 feet maximum prescribed in the UDO. There is not currently an entrance or farm road for access to the north property. Access to that facility will be by way of a brand-new commercial entrance meeting the same requirements that I just mentioned for the south entrance. Fire and Rescue has requested that emergency personnel have continuous access to these facilities at all time, and because they are protected behind a locked gate, so our emergency personnel need to have the ability to access the key to that. And in the past, we've required things in other localities like Knox boxes, basically like a lock box that you type in a key code that they have access to that provides you with the key so that you can get into the facility. Those requirements. They also have asked for the access roads to be extended more into the actual solar field itself so that their fire apparatus have access to all parts of the facility. And that can be accommodated through the site plan review process. They'll issue those comments on the site plan, and we'll make sure that their fire trucks have access in case something happens to any part of the facility. So it may involve more in the way of access roads than what's shown on the conceptual plan. So both projects are proposing revenue sharing, which is enabled through the state, which will yield approximately $10,000 a year for the south project and $6,000 a year for the north project. This is in revenues to the city. And this is based on a rate of $2,000 per megawatt. I believe the minimum is $1,400, so that represents an increased amount, and that includes a 2% annual escalation factor. So that's just the revenue sharing component. That's not the property tax assessment increase in valuation or any additional revenues that the city would see from the additional property or real estate tax valuation, which is substantial. But the applicant is also proposing donations of $11,400 roughly and $7,200 for those two projects to a local environmental organization under their Green Initiative program. This is according to their narrative. So since Virginia's shared solar program is relatively new, I think the law enabling that was passed in something like 2020, staff requested that each of the project narratives be amended to include detailed summaries describing Virginia's shared solar statutory authority, and then just an example that you see before you of how these solar projects, how a subscription in a shared solar project like this would benefit the average market rate and below market rate customer. So basically, to break this down in the simplest possible form, in the example provided, a market rate customer having a monthly electric bill of $127.68, so maybe like a spring electric bill, certainly not a summer or winter electric bill, not mine anyway, would see it reduced by about $5.88, which is about 4.6%, whereas a low-income customer would see a more significant reduction of about $11.76, or 9.2% of their overall bill. According to the applicant, based on the program rules, subscribers would never pay a bill to both CVE, the operator of this facility, and Dominion that exceeds what they would otherwise pay to Dominion for the same amount of electricity. The program aims to maximize participation by low-income customers and to folks who otherwise can't install distributed solar on their own properties. Maybe they have they live in an apartment that they rent, or perhaps they live on a site that has mature canopy trees. Generally, you don't want to take down shade trees to make room for solar, or some other constraint limits them cost. So that's really trying to promote the smaller solar facilities. They have to be less than 5 megawatts on a single parcel of land, and this is supposed to facilitate participation by low-income folks, incentivize participation by low-income folks, while also helping Dominion stay on schedule with respect to the time frame mandated by the Virginia Clean Energy Economy Act, which I believe is 100% clean energy or renewable energy from renewable sources by 2045. So these memoranda here were done along with the attached mapping exhibit that was included in your staff report to show noise levels from the inverters. As I indicated to the public at the community meeting last Thursday night, the inverters do emit a low hum that is more prominent the closer you're standing to them. So what they did is a simulation basically showing what the dBAs would be, the decibel levels would be measured at specific points, the closest residential properties and adjacent public roads, and found that for the South project, 34 dBs was the highest anticipated, from the North project, and 40 was the highest noise level expected from the South project. And these are for residential receiving properties and adjacent public roads. Now, this will need to be turned in. I think you heard a similar presentation from me recently involving another use in another location here in the city. It doesn't take into consideration factors such as terrain, obstructions, so they'll need to do a more robust sound study that takes into account ambient noise levels, which is like background noise, and to figure out what the noise levels from the facility actually are, just to make sure that they're not exceeding these levels. And if they are exceeding the levels prescribed in the performance standards of the UDO, it gives us the power as staff to come up with additional mitigation measures with the applicant in order to reduce that below the level that's the maximum level set. So staff is recommending on this project a full noise study, be conducted at the time of site plan submission. The construction route exhibit was provided, basically we provided to the applicant. What I should say, Public Works Traffic Engineering provided the applicant was you shall use these roads. These are the roads that are best optimized for the for construction traffic entering and exiting, traveling to the facility. The route utilizes major thoroughfares Holland Road, US Route 58, and Brewerton Boulevard, which is US Route 58 Business, in order to limit usage of Indian Trail, which features narrow pavement widths, roadside ditches, and sharp curves. Indian Trail will be utilized to access these sites from the west only, so that's about a 0.85-mile segment of Indian Trail can't be avoided. Conditions recommended by Public Works Traffic Engineering, which are included in the recommendation I'm about to give you, are intended to prohibit access via Indian Trail from the east. So the visual simulation shown here is of the South project from the westernmost residential parcel on the south side of Indian Trail. The visual simulations were updated at the request of staff to show the agricultural style fencing recommended by staff, but as it should be, you cannot really see it behind the double staggered row of evergreen trees that are shown in that visual simulation. This is supposed to be an approximation, but I think it's a reasonably good approximation of what you'll see from the back of those parcels. And on the North project, this is what it's proposed to look like. And it's tough to get any kind of perspective to know exactly whether those trees are staggered or not, but it's supposed to provide a consistent 6 to 8 foot visual screen so that you can't actually see the facility. That's the intent. So that's the the visual simulations. And rather than putting my recommendations on the PowerPoint slides, I had about 9 of these recommended conditions, and it took up about 3 slides until I realized it's probably easier just to read from the conditions from the staff report. So in your staff report, the considerations and conclusions describe the entire process we went through as we evaluated this project against the UDO to determine whether it made sense in this particular setting, applying those criteria that are prescribed by the code. And as a result of that exercise, staff has concluded that the conditional use permit meets the criteria set forth in sections 31-306 and 31-406 of the Unified Development Ordinance, which seek to minimize the effects of this project on adjacent properties. That's the whole point of those criteria. And so I'm going to read the recommendation for the south project first. The north project, the recommendation is the same except for with respect to one condition, and I'll note that difference. So staff recommends approval of CUP 2022-028 with the conditions recommended below in order to mitigate the potential for negative impacts. 1, that this CUP is granted to establish a solar energy facility in substantial conformance with the conceptual plan attached here to as Exhibit C for the subject property located on Indian Trail, tax map parcel 39*39, as shown on Exhibit B property map. So holding the applicant to that conceptual plan, to that conceptual layout. There could be changes around the margins, but essentially it's going to be where it's shown on that conceptual plan. 2, the owner and applicant shall retain and maintain a vegetative buffer at least 50 feet in width consisting of existing trees and native vegetation surrounding the project site to the east, south, and west. An easement, lease agreement, or other instrument acceptable to the city shall be executed and recorded as applicable to protect the buffer area from tree clearing or the removal of native vegetation for as long as the use occupies the subject parcel. Nothing herein shall prevent the removal or trimming of existing vegetation in areas located outside of this required 50-foot buffer that are deemed reasonably necessary for shade management as depicted on the final site plan. So what we're striving for there is to retain at least 50 feet. Doesn't have to necessarily be the first 50 feet, but we've got to maintain 50 feet of that existing forested buffer. Existing forest provides the best buffer. It'll take 20 years to get the planted buffer in a condition where it screens the project nearly as well as that existing buffer will do. So 3, agricultural fencing of a type acceptable to the Director of Planning and Community Development shall be installed for the section of security fencing along the northern edge of the facility closest to Indian Trail. I know the applicant has included on their concept plan an 8-foot agricultural fencing. I kind of think that's a little higher than what you typically find for livestock enclosures and things like that. Probably 6 to 7 feet is going to be more along the lines of what we're looking for there, so that you're not looking at fence, you're looking at the trees and the screening that's meant to screen the facility. Remember, the fence is not solid. It's not board on board. It's a wire fence, so you will be able to see through it. So does an additional foot really make that much of a difference for screening purposes? Of course not. Number 4, prior to site plan approval, the applicant shall conduct a noise simulation study demonstrating compliance with the performance standards for noise set forth in section 31608 of the UDO. The study shall demonstrate that noise from the proposed use will remain at or below the maximum levels set forth therein for any residential use receiving noise from the use, or shall recommend additional measures to be implemented by the applicant in accordance with all applicable requirements of the ordinance. So they're going to have to do a study. If it shows that their noise levels are higher than what they originally estimated, we're going to require additional mitigation steps, and that may include berms, obstructions, solid fencing, additional landscaping, whatever it takes to get those noise levels, or additional setbacks if need be. 5, a VDOT standard commercial entrance shall be constructed at the site entrance with hard surfaced apron extending a minimum of 50 feet onto the site from the Indian Trail right-of-way. 6, the designated haul route for trucks accessing the site during construction shall be via Indian Way from Ruritan Boulevard. No construction traffic or trucks shall access the site from the east via Indian Trail. 7, the operator of the solar energy facility shall ensure reasonable access to all parts of the site for fire and emergency medical personnel and shall install a secured lockbox or key box at the site entrance containing a key or other means of accessing the facility during an emergency. The applicant shall be responsible to ensure compliance with all local and state laws and ordinances. Number 8, the applicant shall be responsible to ensure compliance with all local and state laws and ordinances of the City of Suffolk and the Commonwealth of Virginia. And 9, the applicant is required to obtain all necessary building permits from the Division of Community Development and approval of a project site plan from the Division of Planning for the design of improvements associated with this request. The recommendation is the same for the north project, except as it pertains to the location of that existing wooded buffer. So that one reads a little bit differently, and that is condition number 2. The owner and applicant shall retain and maintain a vegetative buffer at least 50 feet in width consisting of existing trees and native vegetation surrounding the project site to the east, north, and west. Otherwise, it's the same. An easement, lease agreement, or other instrument acceptable to the city shall be executed and recorded, as applicable, to protect the buffer area from tree clearing or the removal of native vegetation for as long as the use occupies the subject parcel. Nothing herein shall prevent the removal or trimming of existing vegetation areas located outside of the required 50-foot buffer deemed reasonably necessary for shade management as depicted on the final site plan. That's my presentation. Just a couple last remaining thoughts, and then I'll let you get to the public hearing and listen to what the public has to say. So the 50-foot buffer, that's a requirement of the UDO. So that's the magic behind the requirement that the 50 feet be preserved. It's a requirement for landscape areas to be planted. It makes sense that landscaped areas that contain existing trees to be saved for buffer purposes would have to meet that same width. So that's the idea behind that. The current setback distance for these properties, for these things, is also 50 feet. So solar facilities that lie adjacent to residential uses or residential zoning districts have to be 50 feet. And I want to point out that this facility is located considerably more than the 50 feet than the minimum the ordinance prescribes. That is by design. I know this owner was very concerned about impacts to adjacent residents, and that's something that he insisted upon. And they've been easy to work with in terms of setting the facility farther back from nearby properties. And I want to thank them for that. In my view, when it comes to noise or the visual impacts of a facility like this, you are going to see it, but the farther it is away from you, the less you're going to see it, the less obtrusive and impactful it's going to be for you as a resident. So that's all I have. I'm available for questions following the public hearing if anybody has any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. I'd like to make a note that this meeting is videotaped and televised for public viewing. Before I open the public hearing, the proponents will have 20 minutes for their presentation. The opponents will have 30 minutes for their opposition, and the proponents will have 10 minutes for a rebuttal. I will now open the public hearing. Who would like to speak in favor of this request?
Hello, great to see the Planning Commission this afternoon. My name is Carson Wynand. I'm Senior Business Developer with CV North America. I'd like to say thanks to Josh. I think that was a great introduction to the projects. I have some materials to work through as well. Some of it will be repetitive to what Josh said, but I'll be bringing up a handful of new points. I have presentations printed out. I don't know if that's allowed, but I'm happy to hand them up to the commission. Okay, no worries. I'll be working off a laptop presentation here. So these are our Johnson North and South Community Solar Farms. I'll try to keep this brief to be aware of the time. I know after I speak, there's a couple other proponents of the project that would like to give comment. So CV North America, we're a nationwide community solar developer. We're about 30 employees out of New York City. We're part of a larger company called CVE Group. That's over 300 employees. CVE North America has 38 megawatts operating of the same type of projects, community solar projects in Massachusetts, 38 megawatts across 8 projects, and then we have 72 megawatts across 13 projects in New York State that are under construction currently. We've been working on those for the past 2-3 years. And we're moving into states where the policy allows us to do so, where there are community solar programs, such as the shared solar program in Virginia that was passed a couple of years ago. We're an independent power producer. I think that's a unique distinction to make. about CVE North America. We're not a greenfield developer. We're not a flipper. We don't just get the permits and sell it off to another entity that finances it, constructs it, and operates it. You know, we're the long-term owner and operator, financier. We've never sold an operating asset. We actually actively purchase assets from other developers. So we're here for the long haul. We're financially stable. In the year 2020, a couple of years ago, we had an outside equity investment from an infrastructure investment firm called Intermediate Capital Group of 100 million euros. And we've been using that money to grow and grow throughout the States, but also worldwide. We have offices in France, Spain, Chile, South Africa, and then the one in North America in New York. So that's just a little bit of background about CVE. We're also pursuing projects in New Mexico, obviously New York and Massachusetts, New Mexico, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Illinois, like I said, anywhere where we can pursue these projects per the legislation. But these Johnson North and South projects, we started working on these about a year ago. We executed a long-term lease agreement with Ed Johnson, the owner of the land. The North project's impacting about 24 acres of a 110-acre parcel. The South project is impacting about 29 acres of a 136-acre project. The North project is 7,200 panels. It will produce 7 million kilowatt hours of clean energy per year. And the South project is 11,400 panels. It will produce 11 million kilowatt hours of clean energy per year. 5 megawatts AC on the south, 3 megawatts AC on the north. We think these sites, the location of these sites is very favorable. It will be a dual use project for both projects. Johnson North and South will be dual use. Agricultural farming will continue after the construction of the projects. There's about 10 acres on both site that Mr. Johnson will continue to farm. It's also previously cleared. There's no major tree removal. This is a really great detail of these sites. We're not clearing 30 acres on each site, with the exception of maybe a handful of acres on the north. There's no tree clearing. The site is not located in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area or the Resource Protection Area. The sites are not located in FEMA flood zones. We're not impacting any wetlands. The sites are located on the outskirts of city limits, away from major roads, away from view sheds. The sites are actually, as Josh said, positioned very well within the sites themselves. They're hundreds of feet away from any nearby abutter structures. So about 450, 500 feet on the south from our facility to the nearest home, about 550, 600 feet from our facility to the nearest home on the north. We think that these projects will be a quiet, long-term neighbor for the city. Improving America's energy independence. This is clean energy that can be produced within this nation. These projects for the long term also prevent a residential subdivision for the community and the residents of Indian Trail. These projects, they don't bring any noise, they don't bring any traffic, they don't bring any garbage. There's a short 5-6 month construction window. It's not a multi-year construction period. There's no need to install sewer and water. There's very little, almost zero impervious surface constructed on each site. So it's a very low impact, harmonious use of the parcel and for the community as a whole, we believe. Point of interconnection. So there is interconnection to an existing utility pole on Indian Trail right by our access entrances. We're in process with Dominion. We've had preliminary scoping calls and review with Dominion. They've actually helped us size each project. That's why the north side is 3 megawatts and the south side's 5 megawatts. We will feed into the Holland substation, which is 3.8 miles away from the project site. We have to upgrade the single-phase power lines. There's a single wire on Indian Trail. We have to upgrade that infrastructure to 3 wires, essentially, to 3-phase power. That's already been disclosed to us. We're aware of it. We're prepared for it. That's it for interconnection. Environmental benefits. So I'll touch on a handful of benefits from the project, and then I'll touch on some concerns. I'll touch on how community solar works, and then I'll touch on some concerns that some of the abutters have raised, and then I'll make a closing statement and talk about the conditional use permit. So from the start, there are major environmental benefits from these 2 projects, and I think this is why the shared solar program and the Virginia Clean Economy Act was passed in the first place from the state level. These 2 projects will produce over 18 million kilowatt hours of clean energy per year, and they'll be operating for 35 years. So for a single year, that amount of clean energy, we're displacing brown energy from the grid. That's equivalent to 2,800 gasoline passenger vehicles driven for 1 year. And we do this for 35 years. It's equivalent to 32 million miles driven by a gasoline passenger vehicle. And we do this every year for 35 years. It's the equivalent of 15,000, it's equivalent to the carbon sequestered by 15,000 acres of U.S. forest in a single year. It's the equivalent of planting over 200,000 trees for a period of 10 years. So there's substantial, measurable, meaningful environmental clean energy impacts that come from these projects. Community benefits, so 1,375 local residents of Suffolk and of the Dominion utility, they will be able to subscribe to these projects. Being a shared solar project, there's a mechanism that allows them to subscribe to receive bill credits on their utility bill, on their monthly Dominion bill, and lead to a net savings. So 1,375 Dominion customers, 30% of those will be low income. Low income is defined as 80% of the state median family income. I believe it's in the 50,000 a year range. Those subscribers, they get a 10% discount to the bill credits that we allocate to their monthly utility bill. It's a 10% discount to the bill credits. They receive them for 25 years every month. There's no sign-up fees. There's no termination fees. It's completely free. You receive savings to these bill credits. It's a month-to-month contract. So those 1,375 customers over 25 years, they're estimated to save $4 million in energy costs across the 2 projects across 25 years. Real quick, the mechanism of how community solar works. Let's say your bill is $100 for a month that you would normally pay to Dominion. You would subscribe to our project. We would tell Dominion to allocate bill credits to your utility bill. They would show up automatically as a deduction. We would try to get as close to that $100 bill payment as possible. So if your bill's $100, we could allocate $100 worth of credits. You would owe Dominion 0. And that's the first bill. There's a second bill to CVE, from the customer to CVE. So you would pay us for those bill credits. We just allocated $100 of bill credits on your bill. You pay us 90% of that. You pay us a 10%, so you save 10%. So you pay us $90 for the $100 of bill credits. And then you pay CVE $90. So you received $100 of energy from Dominion, and you only spent $90. And like Josh said, there's a distinction for this between market rate customers and low-income customers. We can only allocate so many bill credits to market rate customers. I just want to make that distinction. The savings are about half as much for a market rate customer as they would be for a low-income customer. So a single customer over 25 years A low-income customer's anticipated to save $4,500. It's essentially like removing one monthly energy bill every year, avoiding the cost of one energy bill every year. For a market rate customer, it's about $2,200, $2,300 over 25 years. Tax benefits, we'll pursue, for the solar facility, we'll pursue a revenue share agreement of $2,000 per megawatt for 25 years with a 2% annual escalator. That totals $500,000 over 25 years. We're also required to and will pay the assessed taxes on the underlying land. And that will be taxed at the local tax rate based on the assessed value that the tax assessor assigns each plot of land. So given the existing tax rate and an assessed value of $500,000 for each property, we think that the assessed value will increase a little bit after the commercial solar use is installed. That's about $350,000 in land tax that will be paid as well. This totals $862,000 in total taxes over 25 years. All of this revenue is accretive to the tax base, to the city budget. You know, there's no additional strain on city services such as traffic, school, crime, sewer and water, things like that. This is a very quiet, net accretive use of property in the city. CVE, something we do on every project, we donate $1 per panel installed. Josh briefly touched on this. I'll touch on it again. We will donate $18,600 to a local environmental agency. That's the total number of panels across North and South combined. This is something we've done on all of our projects. We've donated hundreds of thousands of dollars through this initiative, and it will go towards causes such as tree planting, land and water conservation, protection of local wildlife and biodiversity, education and sustainability. Those are the general topics that we like to donate to. And we will assemble a committee of local activists and potentially professors, community members to vote on where this money gets donated. Screening. So there's 2 strips of screening that we will plant on the exposed areas of the north and south. For the south project, it's the northern property line. On the north project, it's the southern property line. We'll obviously comply with the city UDO regulations. It will be a 50-foot wide landscaping buffer. We're open to suggestions on how to plant them, on what species to plant, but we will do whatever it takes to make sure that these projects are properly screened. This is dense vegetation, and it takes hold. We're happy to put a landscaping bond in place for 2 to 3 years to make sure you can hold us accountable for this landscaping to take hold. I know from the landscaping company that we will purchase this from, there'll be a 1-year warranty, but regardless, on top of that, our operations and maintenance teams will have to be out there ensuring it sticks. This will do every effort, we'll make every effort to ensure it's not like the other project coming into town. We think that with this screening, and given that it's 500-600 feet away from the nearest structure, you won't be able to see these facilities. These will be hidden from view. They'll definitely be hidden from view from Indian Trail as you drive by. I mean, these are positioned away from homes, away from the road as best as we can on each site. Underneath the panels will be pollinator-friendly vegetation. So it's a harmonious use with the environment, with the biodiversity in the area. We plant this to promote biodiversity for birds, bees, butterflies, insects. It will be a bed of grasses underneath the panels. It's not going to be dirt. It will be blue grama, about 90% blue grama that grows to 3-4 feet high. And we will come out and mow it twice a year. We're also open to having sheep graze it. This is something we're doing on projects in Massachusetts. If the city prefers that, if the city's okay with that, we're happy to have it grazed. The agricultural wildlife-friendly fence will be used to be as harmonious with the wildlife in the area as possible. We're open to 6, 7, 8 feet high, whatever's preferred. And this fencing, one, looks better than a chain link fence, but two, allows the passing of some small wildlife. So the holes in the fence are wide enough to allow a flow of some wildlife. Noise. So the panels don't produce any noise. The tracking, racking, which face east in the morning, they follow the sun throughout the day. They face west in the evening. They're about 5 feet high at noon and about 9.5 feet in the mornings and evenings. They don't produce noise. So there's 2 equipment pads on each site that hold the inverters and the transformers. They produce a low level of noise. The inverters are rated at 69 decibels from 1 meter away. The transformers are rated at 62 decibels from 1 meter away. We had a memorandum, a noise level memorandum performed by a third party, and we are well, given this initial noise level memorandum, we are well under the city's noise levels per the UDO. So the lowest threshold in the UDO for noise are for pure tones for residential receiving properties from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So a specific type of noise, pure tone noises at homes at night. And that's a 45 decibel limit. And the highest rating we had was 40 decibels, and that was at a location that has no homes. It would be woods. So at the locations where there are homes, they're in the 30s, mid to low 30 decibels. And that's equivalent, per the American Academy of Audiology, they have a decibel comparison table. 30 decibels is equivalent to a whisper, 40 decibels is equivalent to a quiet library. So we think that the noise impacts on the surrounding homes is negligible, very low. And also, just worth pointing out, if it does become a problem, all of our equipment is centrally located on these equipment pads. It's easy for us to mitigate further and install some sort of enclosure for all this equipment. Just throwing that out there, and it's something we're not opposed to. Property values. So we think that it's a common misconception that solar farms decrease nearby property values. In my materials, and I'm happy to provide this, we have 3 different studies performed by 3 different independent appraisers, consultants, that look at sale data, comparable sale data of homes, in the period after a solar farm is constructed. And they found that there's no trend or any indication of these solar farms having a negative impact on property values. And we think this is especially the case here, given how well these sites are positioned away from the homes, how far away from the homes they are, how well screened they are. I'm happy to share these studies. There are 3 different studies. They look at projects that are of the same size and larger in Illinois, Virginia, North Carolina, Minnesota, Michigan. There's a handful of these projects, and they've came to no measurable impact on property values. So construction period will be 6 months, 1 month of mobilization, site clearing where needed, laying down the initial access drive, 1 month at the end of demobilization, removing the crews from site, and then months 2 through 5 are the key months. We're putting down the major road improvements, we're installing the fence, we're installing the racking, installing the vegetative filter strips, mounting the panels on the racking in months 2 through 5. The panels will come in, the equipment will come in on flatbed trucks mostly. estimated 30 to 40 vehicles per day, estimated total heavy vehicles per month, heavy vehicles meaning the trucks, 80 to 120 to deliver the equipment for months 2, 3.
Ryan, how much more did you?
Yep,
your time
I
is-
keep it brief. We'll post I have a couple more slides. Decommissioning bond, to make sure in the event we're not around when the project is through its useful life, the funds are there for the city to remove everything. This costs about $150,000 to $200,000 in today's dollars. We'll post this bond with the city. And I just want to point out that two things about the conditional use permit. One, we're happy to commit to a handful of conditions. The revenue share agreement, a preference for acquiring subscribers within the city of Suffolk, the landscaping bond to protect the screening we plant, a road bond to protect any damage that occurs to Indian Trail during construction, the decommissioning bond to remove the facility, the easement to protect the existing vegetation that surrounds the property, and we're also willing to commit to no cameras installed on site. This was a concern of one of the abutters. There's no need for any cameras or any lighting. And I just want to point out that a conditional use permit, means that the intended use that we're bringing to the city here today is permitted under the right mitigating circumstances. It's not a question of whether solar uses are appropriate in an agricultural zoning district. That's already been determined. The city council's also already determined that solar is an appropriate use in the ag zone. So the question is, does this particular project properly mitigate its impacts? And, with all the mitigating measures, how it's cited, all the conditions we're willing to commit to, we think that it does. And that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. That completes the time for the proponents. We'll now open the floor for the opponents. We have a total of 30 minutes, and I ask that after the first gentleman is finished speaking, that the other people coming up don't repeat what he has already presented to conserve the time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Mike Griffin. I reside at 5800 O'Kelly Drive here in Suffolk. In consideration of solar energy facilities within the city of Suffolk, we should consider the broad effects that these facilities will have on the geography of our city as well as the welfare of our citizens. Solar facility developers target cropland for their installations, as this approach is the most economical for the installation contractor as well as the associated power company. This debate should not be about the viability of solar energy. The question that we should endeavor to answer is, should we be consuming precious cropland for solar energy facilities? To answer this question responsibly, we owe it to future generations to consider all facets of losses as well as any potential gains. We are losing cropland in the city of Suffolk and the rest of this country at an alarming pace. These losses are primarily due to three factors. 1, residential development. 2, commercial development. 3, solar energy development. I should emphasize here that solar development has exploded in recent years, and the state of Virginia has gone from 0 solar facilities in the year 2015 to 44 sites currently in operation, and there are many more currently on the drawing board. There is one particular in Charlotte County that is in the design phase right now that I'm aware of that is planned to consume 21,000 acres in one single site, Charlotte County, Virginia. I have here with me today an excerpt from our very own Suffolk 2045 Comprehensive Plan. This excerpt I'm going to read with you is from page 6 of the Round 1 Public Engagement Summary. Under the heading of agriculture, I have 4 bullet items. 1, the city has seen significant loss of agricultural land since the last plan was adopted due to residential development and the erosion of rural character due to lot splits and seemingly haphazard development. 2, agricultural land should be considered a limited resource and tools and incentives for its preservation should be pursued. 3, Development should be concentrated in the growth areas, and there is also opportunity in some of the villages in an effort to preserve agricultural areas. 4, solar facilities are very undesirable because they negatively impact the rural character and aesthetics of the community and have adverse environmental impacts. The United States Department of Agriculture has reported that we have lost nationwide 1.3 million acres of cropland in 2021 alone, and that we have lost more than 13 million acres since 2014. USDA also reports that the state of Virginia alone is losing cropland at a rate of 2,000 acres per week. My friends, these are alarming numbers, and we should all be very concerned. Agriculture contributes, as far as I know, more than $100 billion a year to the state of Virginia GDP. And we're losing 2,000 acres a week, ladies and gentlemen, 2,000 acres a week. When we approve a solar facility that consumes a field or farm, we are simultaneously losing part of our ability to produce food and feed our people. This land is a precious resource that we have been entrusted with, and it cannot be replaced once it's gone. Our land is truly a renewable resource and one of the greatest assets of this great country we live in. Here in the United States, we have approximately 10% of the arable land contained on planet Earth, second only to India. This is a detail that has global impact, and I think it's very important that we recognize facts like this, and we do everything we can to protect our cropland. These farms and fields that we're talking about here today, they may be insignificant to our solar power developer friends, but these fields have been cultivated for generations, providing food and fiber for the people of residency, and they will continue to do so and provide these necessary staples of life for all the generations that follow. Let me be clear here today. I am not here to speak in opposition to solar energy. But make no mistake, I am here to speak in opposition to solar energy development that displaces any of our ability to feed our people. Unfortunately, when we displace crops and install solar panels on fields and farms, that is exactly what we do. We lose a portion of our ability to grow and provide our own food. There are many nations in the world today that would give anything to have our food producing capability, and yet we freely and readily give it away to install an energy source that's only about 20% efficient. Solar developers, by their own admission, reveal that solar energy facilities operate at approximately 18 to 20% efficiency and have a life expectancy of, my research indicated 20 to 25 years. I note that Carson said 35. If that's the case, I will defer to that. Only 35 years, and yet we are considering consumption of cropland that will continue to provide food for us, many generations to come, for hundreds of years into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, we should never lose sight of the essentials of life in our quest for improving life. Here in the city of Suffolk, we currently have more than, this has been a hard number for me to zero in on, but we have currently more than 24 million square feet of warehouse rooftop. Translated into acres, that's a little more than 550 acres of warehouse rooftop. And I know that's a low number. I think we have about 12 million more in the works or being constructed or approved already. We have 19 schools, 10 fire stations, numerous police and municipal buildings. And as I stand here before you today, to the best of my knowledge, there is not a single solar panel on the roof of any one of the structures that I just mentioned. Not one. Why not install the solar power cells on the roof surfaces? The land mass that these buildings occupy has already been consumed. Why not mandate that all the future warehouses here in the city of Suffolk include rooftop solar energy? City Council has that power. They have the authority to do that in a building plan. if, and only if, we believe that we must embrace solar energy to thrive into the future, we should be trying to develop this energy source in such a way that it does not impact our food supply. Solar power developers continue to inundate the mailboxes of local farmers and landowners with solicitation offers to lease land for solar power facilities. The conditional use permits being considered here today, ladies and gentlemen, they are just the tip of the iceberg. There are many more forthcoming applications. These applicants will continue to request more and more acres of food-producing soils to be covered in solar panels. Therefore, I respectfully request that these permits be denied and that this commission begin prompt discussion and consideration of ordinance language that would preclude further loss of food-producing cropland in the city of Suffolk. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Brooks. I would like to register 2 objections. One is the 80 to 120 heavy trucks per month for however many months. I didn't quite catch whether it was going to be the full 6 months or what. We already have too much heavy truck traffic in the city of Suffolk with all these delightful warehouses that y'all have approved to be put in. The other objection I have is the proffer of $150,000 to $200,000 in today's dollars to remove their equipment in 35 years. We all know that the dollar value is not rising over that time period. I doubt that that's going to be sufficient. Thank you. Do not approve this.
Thanks, Ms. Brooks. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Commissioners, my name is Ann Harris. I live at 2455 Lake Cahoon Road. I do have concerns about the use of agricultural land for solar farms. While the city of Suffolk does not have specific policies for such developments, I understand why landowners want to participate in these projects, and I don't begrudge them that, but I think our city needs to proceed cautiously if we want to set the right precedent. While CVE, they seem reputable and conscientious, but we're opening a door, and not all developers are created equally. Most of our neighboring localities have policies in place that limit solar development to a certain percentage of prime agricultural land. And there are even counties in Virginia that have enacted moratoriums on new solar farms to allow their planners time to update ordinances and watch how other projects play out. We don't want to find ourselves in a position where we've hastily sacrificed good land only for better options to become the norm. Mr. Griffin brought up the idea of rooftops, and even the Deputy Director for the Department of Energy's Solar Energy Technologies Office says that we have tremendous opportunity on rooftops, on parking lots, on other areas like that. There are some estimates that 39% of our power needs could be met by putting panels on rooftops. So this could become the norm. We don't want to rush to take up our agricultural land if this could be a possibility in the future. There's still many unknowns about the impact of solar farms in the future. It's still a fairly new phenomenon. The applicant for this permit, CVE Group, has been doing this for only 12 years, and according to their own representative, has not yet actually decommissioned a solar farm, much less had the opportunity to put one back into agricultural use. But we're being assured that it'll be perfectly good farmland in 25 to 35 years if and when they decommission it. But nobody really knows this yet. So we're asking to permit something that admittedly only lasts 25 years or so. And we're given economic impact numbers that are stretched out over these 25 years. I mean, I won't ask you all your ages, but I'll be in my 70s by then. And will this company really be around to clean up the solar field? What will happen with these fields? And I'm understanding correctly, I think, that the city will only benefit less than $1 million of revenue over the entire 25 years. That doesn't sound like a very tempting number if you think about all the possible negative effects. As Mr. Griffin stated, $105 billion was the amount of revenue generated by agriculture and forestry last year. Governor Youngkin announced it this past December that they're the #1 industries in Virginia. So rushing to follow the solar farm trend doesn't seem to be that beneficial for our city of Suffolk that produces a lot of revenue from agriculture. I also, on the topic of money, I just wanted to look more at the true financial benefit for the shared solar program. The low-income subscribers, with the example that was used, they really are saving about $141 per year. The developer receives just over $100 from each of those subscribers per month. So once again, $141 per year is not that significant of a number. So is this all worth saving a tiny, tiny fraction of people's bills over 1 year? So while solar power can have its place, I do think that it just isn't wise to make a decision at this moment without certain parameters in place for our city. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Have to pardon me, I just got hearing aids, so I'm still adjusting. I would like to state that I live on Indian Trail.
Give us your name, please.
My name's Floria Bryant. I'm sorry, I think I'm speaking too loud. I live on Indian Trail, and I live right where this solar panel place is going to be. And I think it's wrong to put solar panels on our agricultural land. I work in agriculture, and it's very important that we keep our land for growing food for the families, clothing our families. We're talking about land that's producing peanuts, which is a very good economy. We're talking about corn that feeds the families by feeding the animals that we consume. We're talking about soybeans. We have soybeans all over the place around my house. That soybeans go in a lot of things, and it's important that we preserve our agricultural land. And to put something that we don't know what the benefits may be or what it might destroy. I live right where the wetlands are, and they're going to put this right there, and I'm concerned what it's going to do to the water. I'm concerned about the animals that they're going to displace, because if they're going to take down the forest around us, where are these animals going to go? They're going to be in our yards, in our gardens, and that's how we preserve our way of life. I moved to my land 30 years ago, and the reason that what attracted me was it was agriculture. There was beautiful animals around. We have deer, we have turkeys, we have all kinds of beautiful wildlife. Where are they going to go? Who's going to feed them? They're going to be all over our yards, and it's not right. We're displacing them, which for solar panels, I just don't agree that it should be ever be done on agricultural land. I hope you'll consider this, please, because I work in agriculture. I've done it for 30 years, and I've seen so many things in the city of Suffolk where they've taken our farmland and done exactly this. So please don't let this pass. It's just not for us people. My neighbor, this road access that they're talking about, it's right up against her house on her land, not more than 40 feet from where she lives. You're talking maybe 6 months of all these trucks. I don't know if you're aware of that part of the section of Indian Trail, but it comes from a swampland, comes right through, and there's a lot of curves. My road in front of my house, I live in a dip down towards where the swamp goes. My roads always store up, and that's just for the short amount of trucks that come through there now. I can only imagine what my road's going to look like. And they fix it, and it keeps falling in. So please don't let these people do this. I just beg of you not to let them do it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant.
Good afternoon. My name's Paul Bolin. I live at 7260 Indian Trail. That's the property that's adjacent to the north there. So actually that picture up there, the right side of that will be the view from my porch. And my concern is that picture looks good, looks great there, but in reality, I mean, I planted evergreens like that too, and blight came through and wiped out about a third of them. They said they're gonna put a bond for 2 years. Well, it'd probably take 5 years for it to even look like that. And then after 2 years, when a third or half of them die, what's going to happen then? We'll have solar panels in, dead trees to look at and contend with too. So I kind of moved out there too for the agriculture view and all like that. Really wasn't planning on that as a view. So thank you.
Is anyone else?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Brian Harris, 2455 Lake Cahoon Road. First off, it's a pretty good plan, and the staff report reads really well. I'm especially interested in hearing more about the sound and the decibel impact, and I'm glad to hear that quote talking about how 30 decibels is a whisper. You dig deeper, 18 decibels is what you experience when you have tinnitus. So that's what we'd be exposing these people to, about twice that. I guess speaking of the staff plan, did you guys all get a chance to review that? Raise a hand. Everybody get a chance to look at that? All right. It's important, just foot stomping, separate from this, just spending the time to look in that because the details matter. And if you've heard me speak up here before, that's what I hamper on are the details. My colleague Mike Griffin was just talking about that loss of agriculture. There is, not all of it, but there are some parts of this land that are rated as prime agriculture. There are also portions of this land that are rated as of significant importance to the state. It's like the best soil that you can have out there. We're considering covering up with glass. I think with that, part of this process that really frustrates me is that, and no offense to the applicant, is that we're talking about putting down flowers and we're talking about some sort of management of ecology with this grass and mowing it a couple times a year. This city has more than 3 centuries of agriculture experience with the Ag Committee, and nobody reached out to talk to us for feedback on what it might be, whether it's fiscal or what this proposal might be for what we're going to put on the ground, if it even makes sense. And I think that's something that we should look at from a planning perspective. If we're going to cover over productive ag, land that's of state significance, somebody needs to reach out and ask what that's going to be. It sounds great. Throwing sheep out there just doesn't happen. That's not just going to overnight make a difference. But again, that does sound good. I think something for us to take away, because it is a big deal that we're considering losing land that produces food. I'll double stamp down that in December, the governor did talk to the agricultural impact and that forestry and ag continued to be the #1 private contributor to the GDP of this state, more than $105 billion. That's billion with a B. So it's no small pennies, the amount of money that ag brings to this state. And we shouldn't discount that with the potential of putting glass up, adding, a marginal savings to the folks. And I know it's a little bit of savings, so I don't totally discount it, but what's the alternative? Are we making money or losing money? I don't know if we can objectively say we're making or losing money. I don't know if that study has been done, what the loss will be to the city of not having not having ag out there. I think from a big point too, the idea of having more energy and that we need more energy, more electricity, we should just take a quick pause and consider how long we've all been on this planet. We've been here forever. And electricity has only been a convenience for a few hundred years. We've made it a long time without electricity. We can't make it more than a few weeks without food. There's no farms, there's no food. Thanks for your time.
I will be as brief as possible. My name is Kelly Hingler, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today, Planning Commission, and Happy New Year to you all. Congratulations, Vice Chair Staylor. So, couple precepts, and I agree with Brian, and I agree with the farmers. And it's not an opposition for or against, it's a set of thoughts. We have 8 districts in the Commonwealth of Virginia and ours is called Peanut Soil Conservation District. These things have been in place for a very long time, including in the adoption of our own charter for the city of Suffolk. The person in charge of ag has to be from Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is our go-to, not just for Virginia, but the country in agriculture. We've been doing it so long, right? I think we've got it right because we're in balance with feeding our own people in our own growth area so successfully that Suffolk is literally named #1 in a recent statistic, okay, because of our diversified nature. So unfortunately or fortunately, when it comes to these energy pieces, I give you on one hand that the state came through with various energy projects without getting into those calculations, you've heard it, okay? But the piece that I don't find the sandwich as 2, pieces of bread and no meat in the middle is that we're not meeting with our state soil reports. Okay, we look at everything else by what is most significant for attraction of homes and other businesses and et cetera, but our ag is our business. And we're not looking at those soils of statewide significance, the most important prime soils that we have from that aspect as well. But may I excite you with the fact that with a number of bills that have passed, we have inbound here another part of the equation. You see, I work in healthcare. And I've been working in it for so long. I've been involved in the National Disaster Medical System years and years ago, and I've mentioned that before this body. But the energy burden opportunities to decrease the burden and need in the community are coming, and they will be providing so much more if we can attach those opportunities to everyone, whether I'm a healthcare professional making what I make, whether it's a grad student, whether it's a shipyard worker, whether it's one of you at the table. And those incentives will be either tax rebates, insulation, windows, you name it, here in 2023. And we really need to be focusing, I feel, at the decreasing of our energy burden per household. Decreased use of energy, not worrying the escalation in the long term. And so that's actually why those programs have come forward at the same time that the state had put the pedal on the gas about 2045. By 2045, as Brian stated and others, is, how much how much of those state soils that only our Virginia peanut can grow in will still exist in Suffolk. And it's not just the peanut, but you get my point. So I'm asking the board, for whatever you may take from my words today, to please go back and look at, and I thank staff, Jason did a great report, and I thank the folks from coming from New York, but what I would say to you, please, is when we're dealing with matters of agriculture, please speak to our Farm Services Bureau, our USDA, our Peanut Soil Conservation District. Please let us be what Suffolk has always been, an epicenter of agriculture, because I did move here. I did come back home from California, and I worked with farm workers who had no health care, and I worked at very high levels in IPA systems, and I'm telling you, one of the reasons I came home is for security here. California is hard hit. I mean, it is scorched earth, and we are going to need to continue to feed ourselves in our communities as well as create the commerce here. In the long term, it's a pivot, and I thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in opposition? Hearing none. We'll open the floor for rebuttal. Mr. Winan, you have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, and Planning Commission. Please allow me the chance to introduce myself. I am Ed Johnson, together with my wife, Carol. We are the owners of the north and south parcels, which we deeded to become Indian Trail Solar, LLC. Both my wife and myself reside at 7557 Indian Trail, Suffolk, Virginia 23437. Except for 4 years in college and living in Augusta, Georgia for 1.5 years as a commercial artist, I'm a lifelong resident of Nansemond County and the city of Suffolk. Growing up on a family farm, you learn the virtues of life. You learn that you must sacrifice family time, and literally you give your blood, sweat, and tears for the land. I returned back to the family farm in 1984. My dad and I farmed till I retired from farming in 2001. While farming, I had the opportunity to purchase the north and south parcels, land which I was already tending. From the very beginning, I realized that this property was going to become an investment farm. I turned to the idea of solar over 3 years ago, and I turned to CVE of North America to help my dream become a reality. The size and scope of their projects, plus the company's history of never selling projects, were huge deciding factors. Before I signed a contract, it was understood that this project would consistently go over and beyond any requirement set forth by the city of Suffolk, a fact which was reflected by Mr. Bateman's reports of both the north and south projects. These solar projects are the most non-invasive form of creating supplemental farm income there is. When the contract runs out its course, the project site will be decommissioned and turned back to farmland. It is not brick and mortar homes we're talking about. It will return back to farmland. 1 year of the solar contract will be equal to 10+ years of farm income. Solar energy is by far the cleanest renewable our country has to offer. By the year 2045, Dominion has to be operating at 100% power using only renewable energy. Solar energy is clean and safe, unlike farm chemicals, and I'm a former farmer. On June 6, 2019, the Center for Biological Diversity published a report which states that the United States is still using 85 pesticides outlawed in other countries. Currently, over 80,000 chemicals are on the market, and the U.S. has banned only 9. My burning desire for this project is fueled by my love for my two granddaughters and my twin grandsons, Waylon and Wyatt. Waylon and Wyatt were born 1 month premature and spent the first 2 weeks of their lives in the neonatal ICU with breathing issues. The boys have since been diagnosed with autism. They're receiving speech and behavior therapy daily and have greatly improved. My fear is that the twins might still need therapy after the age of 18, and this will become too much of a financial burden for my daughter. Therefore, Indian Trail Solar will be setting aside monies for all of my grandchildren. Finally, I will speak with Police Chief Chandler, and with the help of his K-9 officer, we will find the best bulletproof vest on the market. And Indian Trail Solar will donate, over the course of its contract with CVE, K-9 bulletproof vests for Suffolk's four-legged officers. And Mr. Staylor knows how much I love my dogs. Once Suffolk is finished with bulletproof vests for what dogs we have in service at the time, I'm going to turn my attention to all the surrounding counties and cities in the surrounding areas. Isle of Wight, Southampton, you name it, it's going to happen. Indian Trail Solar will give back to the community above and beyond. And I just want to say one quick thing as far as road damage. Yes, trucks will be making the long ride from 58 up to the point. At this time, for the last 50 years, heavy equipment from farmers have been traveling the same route. Farmers who live on Indian Trail have 18-wheelers bringing corn, soybeans, and whatever to market past this project area every harvest season. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Winan, you have 4 minutes. Do you have any other comments?
Good afternoon. My name is Dean Vincent. My business address, 5131 River Club Drive. I'm the development manager for East West Partners, and I've been representing items here for many years, but I'm here in a different capacity today. I'm here as a sixth-generation farmer in Southampton County and have experienced for the last 5 years solar coexisting with our farmland. And I have a few points I'd like to make and everything. There are a lot of positives that we've seen from solar. We've had the opportunity from the income from the solar to give back to the community, just like the Johnsons are proposing to do. It's been able to coexist with our cropland. We kept our cropland just like the Johnsons, 50-50 and everything. They've coexisted well. A few things that can't be underscored here are the tax benefits from this facility, okay? I experienced it firsthand. I mean, as soon as you go to conditional use permit and you start putting this type of facility in there, the city experienced rollback taxes because it gets out of land use and now it goes to that type of use. It's a huge cash can be used for very well-needed services in the city of Suffolk. Secondly, annual taxes. This is a fact. The amount of taxes we've paid over annually since Southampton Solar came off our farmland has increased 600% from the land use, 600%. And so what's the trade-off here? There's no traffic off of this. Yes, there's construction during a 5-6 month period. But after that and everything, there's almost no traffic there. Certainly no more traffic than there is in our farming operation. there are no demands on city services. I know there's discussions about access for fire and everything. We've been there, we've been operating 5 years. It's grassed, the soil, and we've done soil tests and that sort of thing, check the pH to make sure, because, you know, this is a 6th-generation farm for us, and it's a 30, 35-year life and everything, and bonds are in place to make sure it can be restored back, and I made sure of that and everything, because I've got, you know, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. We set all our land up in a trust for that reason. So there's no demand on city services, utilities, fire, police, and schools. And we grow a lot of corn, okay? But unlike corn that can get used as ethanol as a gas supplement, you know, solar is a clean source of power to the electric grid. It operates sun up and sun down 365 days a year. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell. We have 28 seconds, and at this point, Mr. Weiner, I don't think you want to get up. Mr. Johnson, you're finished. We're going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, question, comments, or a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I was going to wait, but nobody jumped in line, so I think I'll get in line first. First of all, I'd like to thank Josh from the city. I thought that was a very good presentation. I also appreciate you attending the community meeting last Thursday evening. I was able to come and listen to the comments of everyone there. Thanks to all the citizens that have come in here and voiced your opinions on exactly where we are with this. Couple of things, and I'm not even sure some of the commissioners even know this, but in the ordinance committee back a month or so ago, we did bring up solar and what was going on with solar. We are aware that some of our surrounding areas, Southampton for one, and Isle of Wight and Surrey, have some restrictions on the amount of agricultural land that can be designated for power production. I think Surrey has one that also covers, theirs is substantially large. I believe it's 10%, but it includes the Surrey nuclear power plant, so that's probably 80% of the property. I know the others are 1 or 2% of the agricultural areas. I can assure you that the ordinance committee will be looking at that because we know there's a number of the solar farms that are going to be proposed and have been proposed and are here at the present time. Obviously, that would come back from the ordinance committee to the planning commission for action for recommendation to city council. I do have a question, and Josh, I guess I will give you this one first if you want to come up. We've had some questions concerning the decommission plan and the cost. I know we've had this in some of the others. The calculation and the amount of that, obviously with inflation and cost of all this, how is that actually computed? Is it based on the number of solar units, and does it have an inflation factor built into it to cover removal 25, 35 years out?
It's supposed to be based on the actual cost to the owner-operator of decommissioning the facility, and that includes all steps in the decommissioning process: the dismantling of the racking system, the solar modules themselves, the disposal costs associated with that, the cost to remove the gravel access roads and convert them back into its pre-development condition, the labor costs, so all the labor material costs associated with that. And that'll generate a figure that has to be bonded for essentially 25 or 30 years, depending on what the city's requirements are. And yes, it typically does include an inflation factor that can be revisited at 5-year increments. That's the way it worked in Isle of Wight. Suffolk's a little bit different because this is the first solar project that I've actually been involved in the city. So, but that's how it was done there. And that's all governed by something called a decommissioning agreement, which is essentially like with a performance bond, it's a performance agreement. And that agreement will typically reference the decommissioning, a detailed decommissioning plan that actually lists the steps that you have to take to decommission the facility. So hopefully that answers most of your question.
Yes, it does. And maybe a follow-up to that. The bond is posted up front, and is it good for 25 years? Is the cost of the bond covered by in this case, what is it, CVE? I guess they pay the cost of the bond. Is that an annual bond, or is it an annually renewable bond? And I guess my question's going, if the company were to disappear, God forbid, and they were unable to pay the bond cost, what would happen? Is there some guarantee to the city that this will be taken care of for the entire bonding cycle or period?
The bond is that guarantee. So the bond enables the city staff to call that bond when the terms of that agreement have been reached. And it's a little bit different in the city of Suffolk than it was in Isle of Wight. I think it has to be discontinued for 24 consecutive months or not producing energy for 24 consecutive months. That's a pretty long time frame. I think in the county we were more like about 6 or 12 months. But be that as it may, when it's considered under that agreement abandoned or discontinued, then staff can take the can pursue the steps to call that bond and use those monies, draw upon those monies to decommission the facility in accordance with the decommissioning plan. And I think you had another question in there that I may not have answered. It auto renews, so it's for the entire term, the 25 or 30-year period. It automatically renews. It's for that term of period. You don't have to like renew it every year. It just continues. Now, sometimes they'll say that they need to be revisited every 5 years to make sure that that escalation factor or that inflation factor is appropriate. We've been going through inflation factors here in the last couple of years that are a little bit higher than the typical 2 or 3% that are called for. So there usually should be a mechanism for renewing that inflation factor and to increase it if need be. But since this is the first one I've really dealt with here, it's, some of these details are going to be nailed down when we get to the site plan process. But they'll have to do decommissioning agreements, decommissioning bond, decommissioning plan. All of that's going to have to be approved before the final site plan is approved.
Yeah, and thank you, Josh. I'm going to elaborate just a little bit on our process, Vice Chairman Staylor. As it relates to the bond, it's a decommissioning bond that we accept in line with the decommissioning agreement, which is a city document that they are agreeing to decommission when that time comes. But as it relates to the bond, prior to site plan approval, they will need to provide us with that bond. Traditionally, how we've handled it in the city of Suffolk, we only have 3 projects that have actually reached site plan at this point, and 2 of them are within the last year or so. But as a part of the bond that we take and that decommissioning agreement, there's an exhibit attached, which is an inflation table. So every year it takes into account an inflation factor of 2.5%, meaning that they renew that bond annually to that updated figure. For the life of the solar facility. So a good example of this, I think, in looking at the decommissioning of one of these facilities in year 1, it was $200,000. By the time you got to year 30, it was about $1 billion. So we do take that into account, and we do require an annual renewal at this time.
Good. That's all I have, Josh.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I move approval of CUP 2022-028 with the 9 conditions?
I second it. One at a time. You got a second from Commissioner Goodman. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none.
I did have a question. What happens when a farmer decides he don't want to farm anymore? Is there a law to make him farm? He decided he's just not going to farm anymore. I mean, I thought about that. You know, if they decide they don't never want to farm no more, that land sit there, nothing happens to it. What happens? This gentleman wants to do something with his land, which, you know, I know everybody's concerned about farm land, but nobody helps him farm it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goodman. I think the machines work. Mine doesn't look like it's going to do something. I don't know what. We'll find out shortly. Are we ready for the vote? Okay. Call for the vote. Oh,
All right, Commissioners, please vote. Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved by a vote of 7-0. And that is for the first condition.
First one, that's for the CUP 2022-028. Okay, now I will accept the motion for conditional use permit request CUP 2022-029.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of CUP 2022-029 with its 9 conditions.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Wyman, do you call for the vote?
Commissioners, please vote. Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved by a vote of 7-0.
Thanks, Commissioner. Mr. Wyman and Mr. Johnson, do you have this endorsement from this body? And it will be going to City Council on 2/15/2023. Congratulations. Commissioners, we're going to take a 15-minute recess. The January meeting of Planning Commission will resume. The next item on our business is old business, staff report presentation on the proposed capital improvement plan FY 2024-2033. Mr. Wine, you have any caption, or are you going right to Ms. Field?
But we'll go right to Teelan here in a moment. I know she's really eager. But as you are aware, annually we update our capital improvements plan, and our Department of Finance does a wonderful job walking us through that. We have all the department heads for the various departments represented today should you have any questions. But without further ado, Teelan Hansen, the Director of Finance, will provide you an update.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman Staylor, and members of the Planning Commission. I am here for the second month in a row to give you a briefing on the proposed capital improvements program and plan for the fiscal years 2024 through 2023. I promise this is a much shorter presentation than the one that you had to sit through a month ago, and also I feel much better this time. So we're gonna, I don't have a cold this time, so we're gonna get right into it, and we'll go through some high-level overview and next steps. So the first slide that you're going to see here is an overview of the total capital improvement plans for the first 5 years of that 10-year period, broken down by functional category or fund. So you've got the Public Utilities Fund, the Fleet Fund, the Stormwater Fund, Transit Fund, Information Technology Fund, and then the General Government Fund, which, as you're aware, covers all of the projects for public safety, transportation, parks and recreation, general building maintenance, schools, neighborhoods, and those types of projects. You'll see there on the far right-hand side of the screen in the yellow column, the total for all funds for all 5 of the first year is just under 382 million. It's $381,936,749. And you can see there broken down by year what the total is when it says total of all funds. The numbers there in the blue are our annual debt capacity, the amount of debt that we like to make sure that we stay under when we're issuing new debt. That has traditionally been 30 million, and we're planning for that to stay at 30 million. And you can see that we are proposing to issue right at $30 million a year for the first 5 years of the plan. This next slide that next two slides actually that I'm gonna show you are those same projects that we just saw in those categories, although this is the funding sources for those projects. So you can see that in the public utilities, and I won't go through every line and every number here, but we'll look specifically at year one. You can see that in the public utilities funding, we have a mixture of revenue bonds as well as a transfer from the public utilities fund that is cash funded capital. The first year we have a significant amount of cash funded capital, just a little over $20.3 million in cash funding, and then a planned debt issuance of $3.7 million. For the total 5 years, it's split about 50-50 with $42.6 million of revenue bonds planned as well as $41 million of cash. The fleet fund is all general obligation bonds. The stormwater is a combination of stormwater revenue bonds as well as cash transfers from the stormwater fund. You may remember last year when I was giving this presentation, we talked about the fact that we were going to start issuing stormwater revenue bonds. We have made our first successful issuance of stormwater revenue bonds, and we have this planned out to be very conservative with it and do a good mix of cash versus bonds within the stormwater fund. The transit fund is all projects, the projects in the transit fund are all funded by state and federal grants, and that is a new transit operations facility. That's one project. Information technology, you see is zeros there. I talked at the last meeting where we have a plan. We do have some planned projects in the information technology fund, but we have some existing funding that is going to cover them, and so they're not shown here in the plan because they're not new. There won't be new funding sources for them. And then we get to the general government fund, and you can see we've got a much larger variety of funding mechanisms for the projects in the general government fund. We have a combination of private contributions, state and federal grant funds, transfers from a variety of our other funds, as well as our general obligation bonds. And you can see there that in the first year, we have a significant amount of state and federal grant funds to the tune of about $49.6 million. Those are primarily, as I spoke in the last meeting, those are primarily transportation type grants. And then we have the $30 million bond issuance, and you can see that in that first year, we've got almost $11.7 million worth of cash transfers from the general fund. That is over what we're required by policy. By policy, the city transfers 3% of our governmental fund budget. Our general fund budget is dedicated to cash funded capital. That equates to right around $6.5 to $8 million a year, depending on if you look across that line as we build increases, unknown but projected increases into our operating budget. We increase the amount of cash that we have to fund in the capital fund. These first 2 years of the fund, we have put a significant amount additional into for cash funded capital, as the city council has recently, within the last just over a little over a year ago, set up a capital reserve fund. And so with money going into that capital reserve fund, we have an opportunity to cash fund a little bit more of our capital projects. The other number on this slide I want to draw your attention to, as it will be relevant in the next several slides, is the far right-hand column, again in the yellow column, the total of the general government fund projects, and that is just a little over $270.6 million. So we'll call it $270.7 million, and just kind of keep that number in your mind, and you'll hear me say that number a couple times over the next couple of slides. First opportunity for me to repeat that number. This is a pie chart that shows what that $270.7 million is broken down by category within the general government projects. And so you can see that we've got transportation is 43% of those projects, schools 24%, public safety 11%, parks and rec 9%, public buildings and facilities at 8%, and village and neighborhoods at 5%. This next pie chart is going to show you that $270.7 million. Again, although this time we have pulled out the $49 million that I pointed out to you, or I'm sorry, the $77 million of federal and state funding. So that $270 million less about $77 million. So you're looking at about $193 million worth of projects here. And how that changes the categories from the previous slide. You'll see now schools takes up a larger chunk, 34%. Transportation is down to 24%. Public safety is 15%. Parks and Rec at 11%. Public buildings and facilities at 10%. And village and neighborhoods at 7%. What that really illustrates is how much funding that we get from other sources that we use specifically, you can see the big difference here in transportation. So the local funding, so this is what we call the local funding. This is our cash transfers. This is our bond issuances. What we really tried to do with this particular capital improvement plan and putting it together was make sure that we covered the things that were needed. A very high priority in the plan is replacing John F. Kennedy Middle School. That's why the schools takes up such a large chunk of the local funding. And we put cash where it was needed. So specifically as it relates to transportation projects, if we got a grant that required a local cash match, we wanted to make sure that we were able to put that local cash match in there so that we could leverage that relatively small amount of local cash in order to achieve these projects through other funding sources. And this last pie chart shows you where the funding source breakdown is. So again, the $270.7 million worth of projects, you've got 54% of those projects are funded by bond issuances. That is over the full 5 years. State, federal, and other sources make up almost 30% at 29%, and then our general fund cash makes up 17%. So we're really trying to get a good mix there of a variety of funding sources in order to accomplish the projects that are needed. With included in this, that 17% of the general fund, $46.4 million is cash funded into the capital program over the next 5 years. Again, by policy, that's about $6.5 to $8 million a year, and so we've got $11.3 million spread over the first 2 years of the capital reserve funds that we're increasing that cash contribution for. So what comes next? We would ask for any recommendations and for this body to adopt the CIP today. And then on February 15th, the more lengthy presentation that I gave to you last month will be given to City Council. And then on March 1st, we'll hold the public hearing for the CIP at City Council, and that is their opportunity, their first opportunity to adopt the CIP in its present form or make adjustments to it as they deem necessary. With that, I am here to answer any questions that you might have. The department heads who have projects in the capital plan are also here to answer any questions, project-specific questions that you might have. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Thielman. Commissioners, questions?
I'd like to thank you for the hard work you do, and I know this is it's a heck of a job. I appreciate the fellow commissioners that have served on the committee working on that this year. I had the honor of doing that a couple of times, and it's exciting to see exactly where the money comes from and where it goes. Sometimes it's hard to visualize. One particular thing that I'm real proud of having been associated with, and that's really from the standpoint of Planning Commission, City Council, and the city staff, is the village and neighborhood and the commitment that the city made 5, 6, 7 years ago to, I think it's the Lloyd Place area, to upgrade the sewers and the open ditches, and I was glad to see that that's continuing in this particular program. The other comment really is, I know everyone here has read all of the reports on the problems that we've had with some robberies and some shootings and some other things, and directly to the to Captain Epperson, I believe it is, and our fire and safety officers. If there's anything that obviously any of us as citizens or members of this committee can do We're behind you 100%, and hopefully, going forward, that the city and its police officers and firemen can get all the support we need, and hopefully we've got that covered in this CIP. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Hicks?
I do have one question on a specific project.
Okay, if you'll tell me what it is,
It relates to public schools, but I never see the superintendent, so who do I address?
Gary Jones from Capital Programs, who coordinates
Don't laugh,
with the
Mr.
schools.
Jones.
He can answer your question.
And you know, I don't like to work on rumor, but I was told that the 45.5 figure for John F. Kennedy Middle School was off $20 million, and I'm trying to understand why, or if that's true. I just didn't want to go any further.
Currently in our CIP, we're requesting, is it 50?
The total is 45.5 for the
Well, there's some previous funding on that project as well. So I just got to flip to the right page here. So there's previous funding on that project of $7.5 million. So you take the 45.5 plus 7.5. So we're at 52.5 million right now. When we put this together, this is the best estimates we have at the time, and so we and Gary can certainly speak to this, and I didn't mean to pull you away from the microphone. But I can tell you the thought process behind the numbers that are in here is this is based on what we had in the CIP last year, rolling forward. So we know that there are inflation issues out there. We know that there are lots of construction-related issues out there. So as we move forward, and you can see we've got the funding spread over a number of years, as we move forward, if those estimates need to be revised, they certainly will be included in upcoming years. There are also some other funding mechanisms or avenues that may come available. For instance, there is a loan program through the state for school construction loans that we are looking at pursuing. And then there's some grant funding also through the state that we're looking at coordinating with the schools to pursue. So I understand your question. Nobody really knows 100% what the final price tag on this school is going to be, but this is the best information we have right now.
And we won't be worried. I won't have to worry about the school not coming up right, because eventually it's going to get in there.
Yes, that's correct. Eventually it's going to get there.
Okay. That's my major concern. Thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions for Mr. Jones while he's here? He's sliding away.
He's glad to get away.
Commissioners, any more questions? Any discussion? I'm looking for a motion to move this to council for their February
15th.
February 15th, okay.
I'll do that since both of us served on the committee. To make a motion that we approve the CIP for 2024 through 2033?
Got a motion?
Second.
You got a second? Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
I want to make a real quick comment. I want to thank all the hard work that was done. I just want to say real quick, about 5 years ago, Mr. Ross Boone and the late David Baker fought real hard for the community part that y'all added into the CIP. And I just want, and the Rosemont Lois Place Civic League fought real hard with that. And so I just wanted to piggyback on what the Vice Chairman said, thanking them. And I also want to thank the Assistant City Manager for the lights.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. If there's nothing else, Mr. Wine, would you call for the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioners, please vote. Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved by a vote of 7-0.
Congratulations. The next item on our agenda is new business. We need a staff report on the significant land use items requiring public hearings.
Yes, sir. Let me go get the clicker. I'll be right back. Back. So this is an item that members of our Committee on Ordinances will be somewhat familiar with. We have briefed them on at least the premise and the direction in which we were going with this. But this is an item that really stems from some direction we've been given by City Council as it relates to. Here we go. Okay, that wasn't me. So, some direction we've received that we hear them, and now we're kind of moving forward with implementing some policy changes as it relates to our land use application process and making some further enhancements to what we're calling our significant land use items. So I'm kind of dig into what that means and what are some of the benefits of it and what the process will look like moving forward. So a history on this, as I noted, over the last several months, there appears to be some consensus that land use proposals requiring city council action could benefit from some additional transparency. We agree with that. The overarching goal would be to ensure that the general public and all interested parties have sufficient time to, one, consume information and also look at the facts surrounding development proposals to ensure that they're prepared should they have a vested interest in it. So presently, all of this information is available, and generally the way the process works is 14 days prior to that first public hearing before you all, the Planning Commission, the blue sign goes up. That is when the Planning Department's phone starts ringing and the planners assigned for the case starts talking out the facts of the application with members of the public. That's worked well, has served us well, can be more time-consuming at times than others. Not all applications are created equal, and we understand that. So some of the information that we have in hand, well, it's vast. In order to get your foot in the door for a land use application, you are submitting a tremendous amount of information for us to evaluate against the comp plan, against our adequate public facilities provisions, against the various environmental agencies and laws that come into play. We are consuming a lot of information, and that's readily available to folks. But right now, generally, they have to call to get that or come in the office and we'll share it with them. We've identified what we hope is a better way to do that moving forward. So lastly, staff's evaluated these methods and like I said, to improve efficiency and improve user experience as it relates to participation in the public process through submittal of written comment. I think this is something that you all have experienced firsthand over the last 6 months or so. Your packets have gotten a little bigger. We don't anticipate that changing. However, I think it's important to walk you all through how we process that information and some of the changes that we hope to make that to improve efficiency, at least on the city staff side and on the public side. As giving them kind of a one-stop shop to participate in the process, and we can get you that information even more timely than now. So our first proposed enhancement is having all documents published on the city's website for public consumption upon the setting of the Planning Commission and City Council agendas. Right now, those agendas are set generally about 3 weeks prior to your meeting. Properties are posted in accordance with UDO 14 days prior. So once that decision is made, it'll post to our website and all of the documents associated with it, all of it, the traffic impact assessment, the narratives, the application itself with signatures will all be posted on our website in one location associated with that case, making it kind of improving the user experience, as I alluded to. The second part of this is the creation of a public portal. Also on the city's website, on that same page, that will streamline the process for providing written comment. So currently how it works from the staff side is we're either emailed or we receive letters. We talk with folks over the phone who may not be able to make it, encourage them to provide some written comment. Generally it's email, but it's not always that way. And staff then has to put together that information for you all's consumption within the packet that's associated with the item. This would really eliminate that portion of the staff and eliminate the potential for not including comment that was received and putting it in one portal, one online portal. Folks who wish to make public comment in written fashion prior to a public hearing would be able to do so on that website. In fact, if they want to make public comment, that is the avenue we are going to provide to them. So with that being said, this is kind of the sandbox version of our website right now as it relates to updates. The key is you'll see that blue sign there. That is where you want to be if you want to make comment on a public hearing item and or do research on that item. So here's kind of a working list. We would note whether it was a planning commission agenda and the date, or city council agenda and the date, the land use case number, so your CUP numbers or your RZN numbers for rezoning requests. And under that, you would see staff's report once that's available. That is generally posted the Friday before you all's meetings, the same for city council. We would provide a link to all supplemental reports, so all of those reports that we have in our possession related to that item will be there for consumption. And then you would also have a link to provide public comment for that specific item. Once again, I think this is a win-win from, one, the public standpoint, improving their ability to participate in the process, but second, from a staff level, it's going to save our staff a tremendous amount of time and allow them to actually really process these applications like they should be able to. So here's what the public comment form would look like. You would need to provide your name, first and last, your address, and I believe a phone number as well. None of the phone number would not be published, but the name and address would be. This is a public process, after all. So, well, what are some of our goals there? Additional time for public consumption. We believe as soon as we kind of set the agenda, we can get this up for them. Right now, some of them may not know what's on the agenda, particularly if they don't live on the street where a sign goes up, until the agenda is posted, which gives them a limited time to process some of the facts surrounding the case. Ease of use, as I've mentioned, all of these documents will be available in one consistent place. So they'll know month after month to go back there. Really, this alleviates demands on staff when information is requested, and in my opinion, really creates some consistencies for streamlining the process as it relates to written comment. Right now, it's a very chaotic process, and we're looking to remove some of that chaos from the equation. So another portion of this is what we're calling significant land use proposals. We mentioned this in the Committee on Ordinances. At that time, we were trying to identify what the threshold would be for significant. A lot of times that depends on where in the city it is, but we wanted to create a threshold that was consistent and justifiable across the board, no matter where an application is. And I'll kind of get into what that means, what's going to differentiate these significant land use proposals from the normal ones. But as I've noted, not all land use applications are equal. Larger scale proposals generally present more significant impacts, be it traffic, school children, demands on services. Larger scale projects tend to be more complex, and the information associated with these cases is far more numerous. So our staff folders for something like a 400 unit residential rezoning significantly larger in sheer information we have versus a daycare for someone who wishes to run a daycare out of their home. Very different proposals. So for significant proposals, it's kind of been at the direction of City Council and discussions with them that they could benefit from more time given. One to the public, but also other stakeholders to evaluate the proposals. And we've identified that additional time being 30 days. So currently, what would be significant? What's the threshold that we landed on? We're calling it the 100s. So 100 residential units or more, regardless of type, would constitute a significant land use application. 100,000 square feet or more of commercial, retail, manufacturing, warehouse use would constitute a significant land use case. Sites over 100 acres or more, regardless of the use, would constitute a significant land use case. With those being our key thresholds, there's also the discretion of the Director of Planning and Community Development to constitute, to use their discretion in identifying what could be a significant land use case. So that is where we've kind of landed. I feel pretty good about where we landed there. I think that's very justifiable. I think that looking back at the history over the last 6-7 years, those tend to be pretty solid thresholds, those that make for public hearing process of a lot of public participation. So I think that makes sense. So how does this impact the timeline for our land use process? So currently, and we generally tell folks it takes about 90 days start to finish to get through the land use application process. Generally, it takes more than that because once you submit a land use application for our review, we're going to provide you comments. A part of our role in the process is identifying its shortcomings to ensure that it's ready for public hearing. To make sure that all of our questions are answered prior to public hearing. So generally, we get an application at the end of the month. About a month later, we hold an internal staff review of those with our land use committee. That includes planning, that includes public works, that includes public utilities, public works engineering to look at drainage, and some other folks that are involved in that review as well. And we determine whether it's ready. It's either ready or it's not, and we provide them comments to address. Once it is deemed ready, and any delay in that land use will generally create an additional 30 days review time. Some of these go back and forth several submittals. It's not unheard of for significant land use cases to go 4, 5, 6 submittals, depending on how significant our comments are, how significant the issues are, and how significant those impacts are. So once it's deemed ready, we go ahead and we send our legal ad in, as we're required to do in accordance with the Code of Virginia for public hearing land use items. And then, so that legal ad goes in, it will appear 2 consecutive weeks prior to the meeting. 14 days before that public hearing, that is when that blue sign goes up. And that is when the agenda is set for Planning Commission, the ads are in, it's on the agenda. The second month is when that Planning Commission meeting is, and ultimately you all make your recommendation to City Council. The following month, generally 30 days or so after your meeting, that is when City Council will ultimately consider the item and make their decision. The proposed timeline for those significant items would add one additional step. Once it is deemed ready in our internal land use committee meeting, there's a holding period for 30 days. That holding period means that the next month, not that month, but the next month, is when we would move forward with our legal ads, the posting of the property. However, we would provide this information on our website. At this point, folks would know that these significant land use items are in the queue. They could then proceed to research them by looking at the documents, communicating with staff, giving them an additional month to participate in the process. Also, with that is, for those significant land use items, staff would brief you all through a staff report similar to the discussion we're having right now on these items. We would provide you with the information, we would provide you with the location, the important facts, not in a full-blown staff report, but certainly an abbreviated summary of what the land use item is. It would allow you all an opportunity to ask questions and or raise any potential concerns as it relates to the land use items as we move forward to preparing staff's report like you are all accustomed to. We would also do that same staff report following the meeting in which you all receive it the next day, generally, with City Council. We would provide them a summary of the item and present it for their information prior to a full month in advance of their public hearing on the item. So that is where that additional 30 days comes into play. This is a change that I think we've heard from the community, we've heard from our elected body, and we think this is a positive. We think that more time to consume these larger projects, the tremendous amount of information that's associated with them will benefit the public and you all and City Council alike. So, the city will update the impacted application form stating this policy. We've begun to have some conversations, particularly with the development community about this. Policy has been vetted and discussed, one with the Committee on Ordinances. We had a good discussion about it, and the development community alike. They're aware of the process, and I think their most important concern is just awareness of it. I think that they're okay with an additional 30 days, provided that they just know to account for that at the beginning of the process, and that's what we're trying to do. Applicants will be reminded of this process throughout the review and dialogue. Sometimes projects change mid-cycle. It's not unheard of for a 90-unit single-family residential rezoning to be submitted that when it's all said and done, they may be at 105. That will change it from being not significant to a significant. And also there's discretion that comes into play here. I think we'll have to read the public sometimes with these to ensure that we're taking the appropriate route. So we're not going to stop here. I think we're always looking at ways to improve efficiency and transparency as it relates to our processes. And one of those that's certainly on our radar, we would probably visit this sometime after July 1, once the new budget comes into effect, but improved public notification signage. Right now, particularly relative to, I think, Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, our signs are pretty small. They don't tell you a lot of information. And we have ideas on how to improve that. That's a couple steps down the road, but it's on our radar. Another is adjacent property owner notifications. And a way to improve this is looking at your immediately adjacent, as we are obligated to do by the Code of Virginia, meaning that you are touching or you are immediately across a right-of-way. Basically, if that right-of-way didn't exist, you would be touching, or if there wasn't a body of water in your way, you would be touching. Those are who we send notices to now. I have experience with localities in the past that kind of expanded upon that a little bit by looking at a radius around the property instead of just a immediate adjacent. That would be a policy that we would have to change, potentially looking at our UDO. That's to be determined. But these are just ideas on how to improve outreach moving forward. You can see this is the blue sign there on the left is our current sign. On the right there, you have what Chesapeake uses. Chesapeake has the meeting date on their sign. They've improved it to, I think, actually outline. This is an older one. This is a couple years ago, but their current one, well, actually, let's go back up to the top. They're actually stating what the request is. So this is a rezoning proposed from B2 and A1 to PUD. Our signs do not do that. I think this offers a pretty easy route to providing more information to the public as it relates to our land use decisions. But it also states when the meeting is held, what time, and where that meeting would take place. And that final action lays with City Council, as it does in all Virginia localities. So meanwhile, our current sign just checks the box that says this is a conditional use permit or a rezoning and has the case number, so you know which case number to reference when you call the City of Suffolk. So this is, in my opinion, the kind of some low-hanging fruit for us to get more information out there. Additionally, this is an example of what we call an APO map. APO stands for Adjacent Property Owner Notifications. We are legally obligated to send mailed notices to property held, the property owners of immediately adjacent properties, in accordance with public hearing legislation from the Code of Virginia. So in this example, you can see the hashed parcel there in the middle. They're seeking a conditional use permit. Looking at the location, this is probably a family day home, just in the middle of a residential neighborhood. You have some open space parcels there in the middle of that subdivision. Those would be held by the HOA. We would notify them. And then you have the 3 other smaller parcels that are immediately adjacent. How this could potentially be impacted if we were to look at a radius, whether that's 100 or 200, 300 feet around a property, is suddenly you're encompassing a lot more. That would potentially mean more staff time. That would potentially impact things like our mailing budget in the department. But we're always looking for ways to kind of increase public outreach. And I know that in this setting, in the Planning Commission before, when folks speak during a public hearing, that's something that they reference sometimes is, I live near this, but I did not receive a notification. If they did not receive a notification, that means they did not touch that property. That is why. But we're never, we're never covering our ears when we're, looking for ways to improve our process. So these are just some things to keep on the radar. But we did want to present this for your information today. And I'm available for really any questions after I provide you with a quick summary. But so information regarding proposals will be more easily available for review. This will allow additional time for the public to consume this information while decreasing the demand on staff. That's a huge benefit. Having all of our written comments through one public tool will help streamline the process and consolidate written comment. It's kind of a one-stop shop for the public. Significant land use proposals, the 100s, would be subject to that additional 30 days of review. It does not double the process, it just adds 30 days. And we think that's reasonable. And the purpose of that would allow for you all, as the Planning Commission, City Council, and the public alike to review facts of the cases and work with staff if you have any additional questions. Lastly, we're not immune to pursuing other means to enhance the process. Those are on our radar too. So with that being said, that concludes the information I had prepared for this discussion, and I can open it up to you all for questions.
Kevin, can I get you to go back to the comparison chart? Well, it wasn't a chart. I think it must have been about five.
The flow chart?
That one right
Yep.
there. I was understanding the whole process, but I don't know when the blue sign goes out now from the proposed timeline.
Oh, so the proposed timeline, right now, the Unified Development Ordinance states that the sign goes up 14 days. So without changing the UDO currently, the public notification portion of the process would be it becoming available on our website and us using the resources we have really through social media and our media department to do outreach to ensure that folks are aware that these significant land use cases are out there. Moving forward, we could always entertain potentially an ordinance text amendment where for these significant land use items, we require posting of the sign. In this case, it would be 45 days in advance of the meeting instead of 14. But I think it's probably worthwhile to ensure that that this is working before getting to the point where we're changing the UDO to accommodate the process.
I still don't know when the sign goes up.
Oh, so the sign would go up at the same time
Still at the same
regardless.
time.
Mhm.
And so when the sign goes up, then the public goes online, can go online
Mhm.
and really see this.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And how long will there be a point where they can't make the comment?
So
Because that gives us the ability to go onto the portal as well.
So the UAL's bylaws require that we make public comment available to UAL within staff's report, provided it is received 1 week before your meeting. That gives us time to make sure it's incorporated into the staff report that you all receive. As a matter of policy, we tend to provide you all comments at the dais if it's received since then. I don't anticipate that changing.
I think this is really good, particularly for these larger projects, because I was thinking when you were making your comments about some of the complaints that came up doing the warehouse project and some others. And of course, one of the complaints that we got was the signage, dealing with the signage, and folks don't know it, so if we're increasing the signage. Also, if there's going to be a site that the citizens can go to on the signage to incorporate that in the signage and in the advertisement, the required posting, that would be obviously very good, because then if they saw it, they could go back and do it. And looking at your little area showing the residential subdivision and looking at where you posted signs, maybe if it's a subdivision, you put something up at the entrance to the subdivision and state, maybe it's a separate sign, but something that says there's something coming up for the Planning Commission and City Council on such and such a date. And just, you play with that, but come up with something so that the neighbors in the community, they might be able to ride around and say, okay, what is this? It's child care center, whatever. And maybe they do need to know about it. But I think it's great. I think the additional time, once it's worked out, we'll add some time to. One thing, I'm glad that I'm going to be able to get a little bit more information, because I don't know how y'all are, but a lot of times the citizens will call me up and say, what the hell are y'all doing? And I'll go, I don't know anything about it. And until we get our report, generally we don't, unless we've talked to someone here. So I think it'll be great for everybody. So sounds good.
Kevin, we're seeing more and more HOAs, developments with HOAs in it. And these HOAs generally have management companies that run it, manage the HOAs or provide information to the HOAs. And I was wondering if there's a way that you all can identify that, or how is that identified, I guess, is the question of who do you send it to? Because they can send it out, in turn, send it out to the property owners, within the HOAs.
Yeah, so absolutely. Using our real estate records, any new major subdivision in the city of Suffolk will have some sort of open space that's held by homeowners association, because they're required to maintain their BMPs, they're required to maintain their open space that's required per our ordinance. So we have that information available to us. So if an adjacent community is impacted, it's something that's readily available.
I'm just thinking that it's an avenue that could be used, through that, so that if any of these things come up, directly involving, a development that is, the property owners that are there, so that they can get the information. I think that it's a great idea in terms of communication process, and I think a lot of this, what we've seen here, whether it's pro or con, it's a good way of improving that communication flow.
Certainly.
Comments, questions? Good job, Kevin. It'll move us forward. We're catching up. Okay. Moving into the next, genre or whatever. We have the next item is the status report of the City Council meeting on December 21st.
Yes, sir. So rezoning request, RZN 2022-009, that's the Retreat at Creekside, I believe that's 111 age-restricted condos and towns. That was approved with the proffers submitted by the applicant. Conditional use permit request, CUP 2022-018, that's the Taco Bell drive-through on Holland, was approved with conditions. The Northgate Lot J Parcel 3 tractor trailer parking lot, was deferred until their next meeting. I think since we've received additional information from the applicant, which are on that application, but that public hearing is still scheduled for tomorrow night. The ordinance text amendment regarding flex space was approved by City Council. The ordinance text amendment for minor subdivisions was deferred until City Council's September meeting. So, no, that's not correct, sorry.
What?
I'm looking, I can't get to it. I believe it was deferred for 90 days. Let me,
Say
I'm
April
looking,
19th.
April.
April.
My book is too tight. And the mini warehouse conditional use permit 2022-019, that is the mini warehouse on Godwin, was approved with the conditions.
And the next item is the preliminary plat approval.
Yes, sir. We had one preliminary plat. This is a rezoning that you all may remember all the way back in 2018. But this is for 106 single-family attached lots known as Town Creek on Holland Road. The subject property is about 20 acres in size, and roughly 1.5 acres or so is comprised of non-tidal wetlands. 2 acres of the site will be comprised of required open space. However, they are providing a great deal larger open space than we require at almost 8 acres. This was initially rezoned back in March of 2019 from B2 to RLM to pave way for this community.
Can we get an address on this property?
Yeah, they're trying to think the best, because generally, if you're going down Holland Road, it's not far before you hit the bypass and get back.
Right-hand side.
Yeah, on the left-hand side.
Going out, okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just across the railroad tracks, yeah.
Roy and Ricky just...
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
Almost right across
Okay.
from there.
I got you.
I believe Parker Propane also.
Right next to,
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
right next to Kilburn.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Wine. Commissioners' comments. I'm going to start on the right this time. No? Mr. Taylor, no comments?
I'd just like to thank you guys for putting me as the vice chair, and I promise you I'll do everything I can to keep our chairman straight.
Thanks, I need it. Mr. Edwards? Ms. Hicks? Step on line? Pretty well. I have no comments, except congratulations, Mr. Taylor. Look forward to working with you. And we will work on getting a replacement for the gap that's in the ordinance committee. And you will be, you'll be the chair, then you can guys, I don't know. That's it. If that's all, then I have no other comments. We stand adjourned.